Welcome to Empowered by Iron, hosted by Dr. Kristen Lander from Fiercely Fueled Nutrition Coaching and Mary Morton, PhD candidate and weightlifter. Together, we are Empowered by Iron.
All right. Hi, guys. This is Jilly Jaworske, and I am co-hosting with Mary Morton here in Allen, Texas, on this week's episode of Empowered by Iron.
Hey, Jilly. How's it going?
Good. How are you, Mary?
Good. So the reason that we're here, guys, is I actually have a meet. Jilly's my coach, and I'm competing tomorrow, Sunday the 21st?
Yeah.
21st. But I wanted to have Jilly on to talk to us today about drug use, like steroids, enhancement drugs, in athletes, elite athletes, the pressures, what her stance on it is, and why she chose to take drugs or not take drugs. We'll make that as a surprise.
Surprise.
Is Jilly clean? We
Dun,
don't know.
dun, dun.
You're gonna have Wada come and test you after this.
Oh, my God. That's horrible. That's so funny.
Okay. So I guess the first question is, since you're an elite athlete, what kind of pressures... Well, can you just explain the drug thing with USAW?
Sure. So we are not allowed to take certain substances as athletes, as USAW members even. So you do not have to be a high-level athlete. It's any member of USAW is not permitted to take, distribute, recommend, have in their system prohibited substances. And we think of prohibited substances a lot of the times as anabolic steroids or other drugs that could potentially be performance enhancing, but there are other substances that we may take every day that are actually prohibited. And so there is actually a list that is provided by an organization, USADA, and you can look up these substances that may be banned in competition. Some of them are not banned out of competition. So you really have to be familiar with it, because it is something that affects us athletes who compete basically in clean sport. Mm-hmm. So as an athlete in the United States, we have all these protocols in place, but and it's getting better, I think, on a worldwide level, but we talk about it more often than ever now because we've had so many cases recently with Rio last year, internationally, even nationally, with these prohibited substances, and athletes and even coaches now who are getting, for lack of a better word, popped for using or distributing them.
Right. That's kind of the typical term, right?
Right, popped. Popped is what we normally hear when you hear about someone getting popped. It's normally because they failed a drug test. So you can be drug tested in competition, which is very common. You can be drug tested out of competition if you are in the testing pool, which, by the way, guys, if you are concerned about any of this, well, you shouldn't be because you're a clean athlete, but you can actually put yourself into the pool. You have to be in the pool for 6 months and be regularly tested out of competition to be eligible for some of these international meets that we see all these high-level athletes going to. So if you were not in the pool for 6 months, like recently we saw the Pan Am list come out, Michael Fox, who's a juggernaut athlete, he was ineligible to go because he had not been in the pool.
Oh. So is that separate from just getting your membership? You have to go in and...
Yeah, so there's a link on your member profile. If you are even thinking about being eligible for an international meet, you can opt in. It's just a good thing to do, even if you are not planning on competing for a while. If you think you're going to make this massive comeback and you want to be in that pool, so you are eligible, yes, you can opt in. It's optional. It's not required.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in general, you have to remain clean, quote unquote, to stay
clean. Yes, quote unquote. And that's where things get really not kind of tricky, but there are different protocols for out of competition and in competition, and there are also exemptions, and so you do have to be really familiar with the list and the rule book. And WADA is another organization out there that provides this list. There's even an app where you can look up these procedures, like what is allowed in competition and what's allowed out of competition.
Okay, here's another question.
Okay.
So what is in versus out of competition?
So in competition means you are at a meet. You don't necessarily have to total, but you are a athlete who is on the start list, who has weighed in, and you are at the meet. Now, if you're in the pool, it doesn't even matter if you have weighed in or weighed not. If you're already in the pool, they can basically test you, at their leisure, anytime. Sure. I was actually randomly tested last year at Nationals, so as soon as I finished competing, there is a random, it's usually not that random if you do,
they're like, holy shit, you, come here.
If you do pretty well and they're like, this person hasn't done that well in the past, they will grab you and they will take you to the back, and you will be required to give a urine sample. And then recently, there have been athletes too. I've only given a urine sample, but they also do blood samples as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and I didn't realize that actually until Nationals last weekend. Someone, Jason Starks, had posted about it, and I was like, oh, well, there you go. So it's not just urine either. Sometimes it is blood as well.
Holy shit. Okay, so, and also for you powerlifters out there, WADA is what's actually in charge of the powerlifting federation of that. So if you're in powerlifting, you would get tested by WADA, but it's very similar substances.
Correct. It's very similar. USADA is what we use USAW uses in the United States. On a worldwide level, you'd be subject to WADA testing, which again, the protocols are very similar but slightly different. And you can look up the differences, because we're not going to go into like the nuances of the differences between USADA and WADA. No. They're really not that different.
Basically, don't do drugs.
Basically, it's like don't do anything that would enhance your performance. But then you're like, oh, well, like, what is performance enhancing and what is not? And this is where sometimes it gets to be a little controversial. It's like, well, this is where maybe athletes would say, well, I'm going to risk it and I'm going to have this procedure or take this drug, or even some prescriptions are banned substances because they are viewed as performance enhancing, but because we are not all high-level weightlifters are full-time weightlifters, this is where we start to kind of see basically the issues with taking performance enhancing drugs, and I'm air quoting, because there are some women and men who rely on these substances that are banned, and have to apply for therapeutic use, or sometimes they cannot. It's just completely banned. And for them, they really have to make a choice. Like, am I going to be a clean athlete, or do I have to do this for my health?
That's interesting.
And I really think that that's where we start to see not all, but a lot of these people kind of flirting with danger, I'd like to say. Mm-hmm. It's like Midol, right? Midol has a diuretic in it. Midol is banned in competition. If you're on your period and it happens, it's like, oh, am I going to pop a Midol? Like, what are the chances I'm going to be tested? Do I just suffer through? Is it going to affect my performance? That's like a really good example of, I know of people who take Midol or have it on them in their bags. And, when you go in, and it could have been a week ago and you're trying to remember, oh man, like, could I have taken it a week out? Like, it's out of your system. It is out of your system at that point, but right. They're looking for levels, right? They're looking to see, are you using Midol as a diuretic? These are options that you and your coach are really weighing. There are certain antidepressants or certain mood-altering drugs, or drugs for like concentration and focus is what we really see kind of being abused. Like Adderall is banned. So there are some people who their mental health professionals really believe they need Adderall or a similar substance to function. That's completely banned. So that's something where you would have to apply for therapeutic use. Now, if you have a career outside of weightlifting, or you're in school and you require Adderall to get through it, you have to know that's banned and get off, right? If you're not in the pool, get off in time in order to compete. And that's where we start to see, like, oh, maybe they were pushing a little bit and they were tested for a certain level of this substance. But I mean, those are not... And like, so going back to your question, like, when do athletes like have pressure to use these drugs? Quote drugs, because they are drugs, but they're not. There's different drugs. Those are the times I really hear about athletes like talking about the pressure to use certain substances.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's not just like, oh, am I going to take steroids?
Right. No, it's not just like steroids. And I think there's like a common misconception around that, it's like, sometimes there's a joke. It's like, well, everything is banned. Well, not everything is banned. But too, like, out of competition and in competition, there are differences. So if you're using it for a competitive advantage, if you were taking Adderall for a competitive advantage, right. I mean, it's kind of a hard line. Like, I know of competitors who have literally sat out of nationals. They're not in the pool. They've not opted in because their therapeutic use was not approved for Adderall.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and so they skip out on university, or they compete. And here's where it gets a little crazier. They will still compete at local meets on these substances. And I'm not going to say who, but I'm sure we all know of someone who's taken Adderall and gone to a meet, or had really high levels of caffeine, which if there's a certain level of caffeine, that is also banned.
What?
Yeah.
So you can't down
Correct.
7 Monsters?
Right, you can't drink 7 Monsters and then piss in a cup. You will, I'm sure it's more than that, but there are certain levels of even substances that are allowed where the level, like testosterone, right? It's just not acceptable. So with the addition of this, well, I think it started, I don't want to say it started in December of 2016. It definitely started in January of 17. It was active. We recently started having local meat testing. So
Really?
Yes, you can actually pay to have USADA come out and test at your meet as a meet director. So we've now moved towards having drug testing at local meets to sort of combat this issue with athletes who maybe, and this is horrible because this does happen, but there are some athletes, and we saw a ton of bomb outs at nationals, and I'm not to say that all these people were on drugs, but in the past, we've seen athletes qualify for meets while on substances that were banned, and then cycle off or think they were cycled off of these substances before attending a national meet where there was a higher chance of them getting drug tested.
Right.
And that's how they were able to qualify, but obviously they don't perform as well at those national meets because they're off said substances.
Right.
So that addition, which is a really good addition, is to basically continue to keep the sport clean, but it's changed the game a lot for a lot of people.
Yeah, because now instead of just, you think of being drug tested as almost like a badge of honor.
Right.
But now it's moved into everyone else. I have to say, it's not the angle I thought you would take on this topic.
No. Well, because so when we talk about things like steroids or performance enhancing drugs, so what comes to mind are SARMs.
Yeah.
SARMs are used, by the way, guys, you can look up SARMs, SARMS. You can wiki it. Basically, it affects your receptors so that you can utilize hormones differently in a way that would give you an advantage. We see SARMs used a lot in CrossFit athletes. That's what a lot of them get popped for. A lot of their women get popped for also certain anabolics. Usually they're oral anabolic steroids.
Right.
SARMs and oral antibiotics, we don't see a lot. There are some people who do inject, but I don't feel like that's as common in this community. If you look down the list of people who've recently been banned, Michael Gringus, which no one is talking about, which blows my mind too, is a coach who was recently popped the weekend of nationals, actually.
Holy shit.
Yeah, so and I'm sure there's going to be more sanctions coming out with that as well. He was actually a coach providing oral anabolics and SARMs to his athletes, and he has the longest ban that I think I remember or know of. It's 12 years. It's not life.
Holy
because
shit.
a lot of times they're just straight up, if it's a coach, it's for life, and he's not for life because of his compliance with USADA, with providing information and coming forward. So provided that he has provided this information, I predict we will see more sanctions coming out. I just think that they're probably processing them now. So, but yeah, that's what we're talking about. It's not, when we talk about drug use by athletes, there aren't girls shooting themselves up with testosterone necessarily.
In
weightlifting. Now, we're not talking about USAPL or bodybuilding or anything else. I'm not going to speak on that. I'm not an authority on that at all. And not to say there aren't some weightlifters out there who do this, but specifically from a female perspective, we're really looking at SARMs and orals, and then things like Adderall, or diuretics. Diuretics is another thing. Or, what is her name? There's a girl who was popped because she posted a picture, very stupidly, of herself receiving IV fluids too close, because IV fluids not normally banned necessarily,
right.
But they were so close to her competition, she was rehydrating, that she admitted it and got a shorter sanction, but IV fluids are banned, regardless if it's just, just fluids. It's not even a drug. It's just the fact that intravenously she's receiving fluids before competition. That's what we're seeing. It's those kinds of competitive advantages. It's not necessarily like girls who are trying to add muscle or men who are trying to bulk up so that they are like the biggest, baddest men ever who are getting out on that stage and they look jacked,
So do you think that it's a disconnect between maybe the education of some people, or not some people, but some federations or some organizations versus what athletes need to function as humans, not just as athletes, but as humans? Because most humans that need Adderall to function, no one thinks twice about it.
You know what, and this is from someone too who is a coach and has a club and like does compete at a high level.
TSS Barball, check them out.
TSS Barball,
San
by the
Antonio.
way, you're right. Cool. I don't think it's a disconnect.
No.
I don't think it's a lack of knowledge. I think that with people who do it, although there are idiots everywhere, it's not limited to weightlifting, it's just there are idiots. Most of them are not idiots necessarily. Of course, there are exceptions to this, so most are taking a calculated risk.
Fair.
And it's something that we can even talk about, Sarah. Sarah, right, was banned. Her doctor said
Sarah Robles.
Yes, Sarah Robles, right? She took a calculated risk. She had a medical condition that required a substance that was banned, and her coach stood, beside her. Tim Swords is still her coach to this day. She happened to be tested and popped. Now, we can go on and say, like, well, she should have known and this and that. And yeah, you know what? She very likely knew. Mm-hmm. She probably was in the process of getting therapeutic use because she, is a very high, like that's the highest level, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about the highest level, not like even
Olympian.
right, not even national level or like a set. We're talking about Olympian. That's calculated risk. And she was popped, and then there was all this controversy about them lifting it early and this, that, and the other, which again, like totally different topic. But that was something where even sometimes when you have a medical condition, that doesn't change the fact that a substance is banned. So at that moment in your career, you're sitting there and you're calculating the risk with your coach and you're like, do I do this or not? Mm-hmm. Like, do I need this medical attention right now, right? There are times you may need IV fluids in an emergency, and like, yes, you still have to go through and report this to WADA, but like, if you happen to get tested before all of this is communicated, or they see something and then they test you and then you admit it, there are sometimes, and I'm not to say that USADA is malicious or WADA's malicious, but they're
doing a job.
They're doing a job. And sometimes the timing just happens to be right where you are going to get popped. There are also situations that are kind of interesting, and I can't think of any where they have been popped necessarily, but if you are in the pool, once you are in the pool, you have to remove yourself from the pool. So you can remove yourself by retiring from weightlifting. And so you don't have to be tested. Like, if you refuse testing, then you're going to get banned. Right. But your other option is to retire. So if you retire, which means you refuse testing, you cannot re-enter the sport of weightlifting. And God, I hope I'm not wrong on this. I want to say it's 4 years. It might be 2. It might be 2.
I'm pretty sure, from what I remember, it was a 4-year ban for Sarah.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Well, when you retire, you have to be retired for so many years before you can re-enter the pool. And it's either 2 or 4, and if anyone else out there remembers, I know there's someone, and I'm sorry I don't know this, but when you retire, there is a certain number of years where you must be retired, and when you come back, you still have to pass that test.
Interesting.
Yes. So, like, if we look at, like, John Northspan, like, he still is, like, has to basically come back and then be tested again, and etc. But where was I going with this? Remind me, what was the question again?
We were talking about the timing of and the calculated risk.
Oh, okay. So, yeah. So, like, if you know you're going to be out, say, like, you have to take a bunch of drugs because you have cancer, right? You don't remove yourself from the pool. They can still show up a year later. Maybe you haven't competed in a year, right? You haven't removed yourself. You're still in the pool.
Right.
For, I want to say it's either 2 or 4 years. And it happened to one of my friends, actually, who lives out west, and he's working now. He's not even weightlifting. And they showed up to I want to say it was a t-ball game, and he thought that someone was, like, fucking with him. he's like, I'm not taking your damn pee test, blah, blah, blah. He thought like someone was pranking him because he hadn't lifted in almost 2 years. But he had never like actually retired from weightlifting. Now he had to either pee or retire in that moment. He could have been on a substance. He could have been on Adderall. He's not even lifting anymore, but he's still technically like an active participant in the pool. Like he could have been popped. Now thankfully he just peed and like it was no big deal, but like in that moment he would have had to retire.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so like these are like all just, I guess, and I hate to say they're calculated risks, but they are.
They are.
And we don't think about them all the time. I think about them, like, you know, my athletes have to think about them, and I probably think about them more than anybody else because I have been tested, and I think once you're tested and you've gone through the protocol and you realize like how regimented it is, you're just, not to say you're neurotic about it, but like you're just more aware, I guess, of what the process is and how stringent it is, and like even if you know, wash your hands before you seal the container, you know, you gotta, you know, it's a very intense process. You're signing your life away, you're answering questions about what you've taken this week, you know, the day before, what amounts, your dosages. So it's something that like no athlete really wants to go through if they know they are on substances who are banned.
Oh,
unless
wow.
they absolutely have to.
Jesus Christ.
And so I think that's really like what it comes down to is, you know, we don't really see a lot of high-level athletes who have been through this process getting popped.
Right.
It's the people who come out of nowhere who have never really gone through this testing before, who don't realize how stringent it is, who are getting popped. It's the people who sort of fly under the radar or come out of nowhere and they get to their first drug test or maybe their second drug test and they're like, well, crap. There's really no way out of this. And so it's funny when you like read these, again, for lack of a better word, reports on like what was said or what they claimed happened, or the hearings, you know, you read through them and you're just like, anyone who has ever been through any of these protocols would never do this. Unless there was something going on medically, and at that point, you really do have to remove yourself from the pool and not compete, and take care of your health, and go through all of the protocols to make sure that you aren't banned or popped, because it really can destroy your whole reputation, and your gym's reputation or your athlete's reputation.
Right. Holy shit. Okay, so let's talk about something a little different. So I know that you've been injured for a while.
Yes.
And I know that a lot of high-level athletes, like, that's their job. You know,
Yeah.
they train for so long. That takes a toll on your body.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So, as a high-level athlete, what kind of, I don't want, pressures may be the wrong words, but
Okay.
how enticing is it to think that you could take something that would make you feel better, perform good,
Right.
and look good? Like,
Right.
how do you avoid those pressures, or what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's not, especially with like how out of testing works, you know, and how local testing works, and the tests are only getting better, right? Like
Right.
if you actually follow what's going on in the world, you know, they keep your pee samples, WADA keeps your pee for 8 years. So yeah, so if you think it's gonna
That's a stinky room.
yeah, if you're just thinking it's gonna just go away, it's not. They are keeping these samples and running random retests. And they're probably not going to do it from like a nationals. We're talking about an international meet, right?
Right.
So right now, you may pass a test, and 8 years from now, they may have a better test where you get popped. And 8 years from now, let's see, I will be 33 years old. 8 years from now, I would hate to piss in a cup and get retested and get popped for something that maybe they can't test for now, or it's a level they can't test for, and it comes back in 8 years to haunt me. Now, because I mean, I plan on like staying in the sport of weightlifting.
Right. I mean, it's
Right.
your career.
It's my career. So for me to piss in a cup and take a substance, knowing what's going on, knowing the countries and the athletes who have been banned, I mean, they don't even care if you total. Sometimes they'll still even test you. Like, and this happened at Worlds in Houston. There was a guy, and again, I should know this, but I don't. He bombed, and then they tested him, and he got popped. Like, literally worst day ever.
Worst day ever.
Doesn't even,
God
like,
damn.
'cause, you know, he could have been the random, right?
Right.
Or maybe he was in the pool, so he's getting tested, and it's like, God forbid you take something that you know has a performance enhancing effect, and you know, like, we're not talking again about like Midol, even though it can be banned, right? We're talking about really now like something performance enhancing, whether it's growth hormone or
something
steroids.
you legit know.
Like that like you're getting it from a sketchy source and you're taking it because you want to be better and someone doesn't know about it yet. Or like we hear about, like even recently in the last 8 years, you know, there's drugs that like we again could not test for that now we can test for. You take something sketchy like that, you don't know the half-life on it, you don't know how long WADA can test it, like for, you don't know how far back it's going to be in your system. It might be synthetic, it might not be synthetic, you have no idea. Then they have your pee in a little jar somewhere for years, and they happen to pick you. It's a very stressful situation.
Yeah, no shit.
Do you want to live with that stress for 8 years? No, then there's really no freaking pressure. Now, I can see where there are athletes who... They truly have, like, nothing going for them. And that sounds terrible, but, like, they don't care. Or they're at that breaking point in their career.
Right.
Those are the people who really you need to worry about, I think.
That would go towards...
Because then it's, like, at what point, like, they have nothing to lose, right? Like, they leave, they go do something else, they get off social media, people forget about them, no one knows them. It's like a make or break kind of thing.
Right.
But for me being injured, like, yeah, I'm injured, but that, so again, let's talk about me being injured. It's really like not that big of a deal. It's like I broke my arm. And so, right? Like I broke my arm.
Jilly.
I know, I broke my arm. I'm just mostly out of shape at this point. I'm like just slightly overweight, and by slightly I mean I'm like a kilo over. I know, really out of shape. So my arm just doesn't feel right because I lifted on it fractured for almost 2 months, including the AO last year. We didn't know it was fractured. And it was a stress fracture, so we didn't see it when I had it x-rayed, and then I went to a training camp, and apparently I fractured it worse, and then they actually found the fracture. So I've just been basically resting since February and starting to like press again, squat a lot. I have put on weight. That's like no freaking secret, but it's not even really bad weight. All I've been able to do is bodybuild, which if you bodybuild, like I just have the body type where I'm going to put on weight. It's not like I'm losing weight and adding muscle. So I'd like to come back sooner than later. And knowing, again, like I said, that they keep your pee for so long and they are getting more stringent, it would be pretty stupid to take anything because I would have to apply for therapeutic use to take anything. I would be denied, first of all, because there's nothing I could take right now that would make me heal faster. That they wouldn't straight out be like, no, Jilly, like, this is never going to ever be approved for therapeutic use.
Right.
If I decided to take something, I would just have to flat out retire. And then be retired for a certain number of years, come back, pass a drug test, and then I would be let back in.
But you're so young. That's too many years of your life.
Right. I mean, it's just like, I think it's not even that I'm so young, it's that I'm so old that it would be dumb. Because I'm 25, so if I'm out for, and I want to say it's 4 years, and it could be 2, I could be wrong, but I think it's 4. If I'm out for quad, I'm almost 30. So to come back into the sport at almost 30 after retiring, because like if I was on something, I wouldn't be so dumb as to pee in a cup, I would just retire, right? Would be stupid because I'm a club director, like I'm an active member of USAW, like there's no incentive. And I think that's the problem, is that if you're as educated and as logical as I am, then you just don't do it.
Right.
It's the idiots of the world, again, who are taking these things.
It only takes one.
And yeah, no offense, like again, not all people are idiots. I'm talking about there are some cases where there was a medical condition and it was just not properly documented. And again, this is like 1 or 2 people, not most of the people we see popped.
Right.
These are like the very rare cases where the paperwork was mishandled or the athlete didn't get it in her time or the coach didn't or whoever's responsibility it was. We see these lighter sentences because of more administrative errors than anything. Now, the action was still taken, like it was still wrong,
right?
But there was something documented somewhere along the lines that it needed to be taken, and that athlete just had to sit out because it had to be done for health reasons or life reasons or whatever we want to call them.
There's a lot of topic on drugs.
I know.
Well, it's funny because
I never paid attention to that stuff, but
Yeah.
as you get more and more into the sport,
You do pay attention.
you start paying attention, and you're like, well, why isn't this person at this meet? Why? Because who's going to go public the minute that they get popped for something?
Oh, no. Well, that's the thing, too. You know, there was a girl who was popped. She was a 53, not Charisse Chan, and I'll just freaking say it, not Charisse, but there was another 53. Yes, she was a 53, and she got, like, 5th at Nationals last year, and she got popped. She was on a SARM and an oral, and she, basically, no one's heard, I don't know what happened to her, I have no idea, and so she just ghosted. I mean, she's out. But again, top 5 at Nationals, came out of nowhere. She's almost 30 years old, no one even knows who this girl is, and she's, like, popped, and no one talked about it. Those are the people we want popped.
Right.
She's not involved in the community. She
just showed up for a medal.
Yeah, she just showed up. She was going for a medal. She didn't get a medal. She got 5th. She was probably the random. And those are the people. That's the random, right? Like, air quotes again. That's the random because no one knows who they are. I was the random, right? Like, I bombed at Nationals in 15 and then broke top 10 in 16. So I was the random in the white singlet. Like, yes, of course, it stands out. It's like, okay, where did she come from? What is she doing? Which, by the way, I very much passed my drug test.
A+ for Jilly.
A+ for me. Those are the people you want to test.
Right.
You're not going to see people like Courtney Batchelor or Colin or even Pope, any of these athletes who are in the pool getting popped because they are tested so regularly.
Right.
Unless, of course, there was a miscommunication or something going on medically where it just was not improved in time and they showed up because, you know, when you're in the pool too, I don't think people realize that you have to report your location even if you travel. So if you're on vacation, if you are driving somewhere, if you are staying somewhere other than your house or like that place of business, you have to report it. So the only place that they can't come and test you is a war zone.
Fair.
So if you
that's
go to
fair.
a country that's a war zone, you're safe.
Okay, guys, if you're on drugs and you're worried about getting popped, go to a war zone.
And hang out there. And this is like a legitimate conversation I've had with a member of USAW. We were weighing the pros and cons of taking drugs because these are the kinds of conversations we have. And we're like, well, if we were ever to do it, we're going to go to a war zone. And then the chances are that, you know, we would make it out of that war zone successfully were pretty small. So we just decided that it would be pretty stupid to take drugs.
That seems like a
Yeah.
very calculated risk. Non-risk?
Right? Calculated non-risk. It's like, there really are no options. Don't do drugs. Like, that's pretty much the message that USAW wants to get across, that the athletes and the coaches want to get across. Like, it's just not worth it. The other misconception I think people have about drugs, too, if we're talking about misconceptions, because, like, it's not that hard to get popped, first of all, and, like, there's really no cheating your way out of it. Drugs don't make you that much better.
No.
And this is where people are going to be like, no, Jilly, you're wrong. Like, no, they don't. Like, you can't be a potato and take drugs and be like an Olympian.
Hashtag potato Olympian.
Yeah, if you're a potato, and a potato, guys, meaning like you're just starch and you have no talent whatsoever, no athletic background, and you just start taking drugs and do nothing differently other than take drugs, you're still not going to go anywhere.
Right.
Like, you still have to train. You still have to be semi-talented, and honestly, it's going to bump you up a level. So if you're a potato, you might be a French fry.
Oh.
Right? Like a French fry. But again, like, these are the athletes at risk. Like, if we were to break it down so it was like tangible for people, we're looking at people who like would not go to nationals and maybe they're an AO series lifter. Those are the people who you have to worry about. Because anyone who competes at the national level here, like in 2017, which it's getting more competitive than ever, you already know you can't take drugs.
Right.
Right? So it's the people who are almost potatoes who are just like, maybe if I take this drug, I'll win a medal at one of these events, and I will cycle off on like this day and blah, blah. Like, they do their research on Reddit or whatever. Like, wherever they're getting their misinformation, they show up and they
Some
get
guy on
popped,
the internet said 3
right?
weeks. That's
And
good.
they're not talking to their coach, or, you know, maybe they are, right? Like, again, there was a coach who just freaking lost it all because he was not only recommending, but supplying these substances to his athletes, which, again, I am not that coach. I don't know what was going through his head. I don't know why he thought it was a good idea. I don't think there's a good reason. I mean, that's my personal opinion.
It's a business model.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that was his business model. Clearly, it didn't work out for him. So if you are a coach who is thinking about supplying these substances, or if you are a coach who currently is supplying these substances, and there are coaches who do, and I know of them, and I have also reported them, you're going to get busted sooner or later.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen. I promise you it's going to happen, and any other coach who knows about it out there will make it happen. So
right, because as a coach, you want your athletes to do best, and your athletes aren't going to do best if this other team they're all on some sort of enhancement drug.
Correct. Absolutely correct. And it's also your responsibility, if you are a member out there listening and you are scared, or you're listening to this freaking out right now, you're ready to retire from USA weightlifting and you're an AO series D session lifter. First of all, joke's on you. That plan was never going to work. You probably should have done your research. Here are your options. Get off your drugs. Okay?
Jilly ruins dreams.
Get off your freaking drugs. Do not go to any of your meets. Throw away everything you have. Take a few years. Get clean. Find a coach who can actually coach you. Mm-hmm. Like an actual coach too, and not to knock remote coaching, because I am your remote coach. But find a coach who can actually help you.
Find a coach who gives a shit.
Find a coach who gives a shit, who cares, who is clean, and who has not only has success as a coach, but as a lifter to some degree, to the best of their ability, who is devoted to your success, and get out of D session, and maybe make it to B, maybe make it to A. But your first step to recovery is to accept the fact that what you're doing is currently wrong, and take steps to move in a better direction. And if you know of someone who's on these substances, or a coach who is providing these substances, there is a way that you can actually report these individuals anonymously. You can also report them using your name and your number, so you can actually have a conversation with USADA about what's going on to resolve it. But you can submit anonymous tips. It's not to say they will be followed up on, but there are steps you can take to stopping the drug use, right, if you know of it, or you're aware of it and it makes you uncomfortable.
So there are actions people can take.
Yes, it's not like a hotline necessarily. It's not like stop drugs now. Right. It's not like someone's going to pick up the phone and talk to you about it right this second. But if it's something you're really worried about, then yes, go on USADA, and Google it. Literally, type in USADA, and it's right there on the homepage. You can click it and submit your anonymous tip. So, you don't have to turn yourself in either. That's like not what I'm saying. It's not like you've committed a murder, right? There are different degrees of crimes, and we're not even going to call it a crime. This is more of an ethical issue.
Right.
I'm not saying go and call USADA and bawl your eyes and be like, oh my gosh, I didn't know, or this or that. Now, if you are an athlete who's currently taking a prohibited substance and you didn't know, and it is for a medical condition, go online and research therapeutic use. Go apply for it. Not to say you're going to be permitted, but go apply for it. Now, if you have to be on these substances and you cannot compete because of them, you kind of have to have, you have to have a come to Jesus meeting with yourself and be like, am I going to continue to take this? Is there an alternative? Or do I just not compete?
Right.
Right? Because like competitive sports too, they aren't for everyone. And I think we also need to recognize that. The way that USA weightlifting is going, there's really no room for people who are on drugs. There just aren't. And in the sport of weightlifting, this can be argued because, as we know it, the rest of the world, pharmacology has always been a part of weightlifting culture. Mm-hmm. And if you are familiar with these other cultures, you know that it's a top priority for these other countries. Belarus and Russia and a lot of countries, China. This is not a secret, but we're moving now forward, and you have to accept that we no longer live in an age where you can take drugs. Sooner or later, someone's going to find you. They will find out. They will report you, or you will set yourself up for failure. And so you really need to make a conscious choice to align yourself with people who, this is hard because it's not like you're a bad person if you take drugs, but if you have goals as a competitive athlete, right, you need to be coached by someone who is not on drugs.
Yes. Yes, because they won't understand
right? They're not going to understand everything. And it's not like, I'm not going to go ahead and say that, like, you're a bad coach because you've taken drugs in the past either. Or maybe you're currently on drugs. That doesn't make you any less of an authority on weightlifting. But for those people who are maybe national level lifters or really want more than just a meet coach, they want a mentor, you're probably going to bond with someone a little bit better who has been an American weightlifter, not a foreign weightlifter, because most, and this is me generalizing again, but a lot of foreign weightlifters of the past, years gone by, it was a part of their culture to take these drugs. Mm-hmm. You may have a hard time relating to them, and their success, or maybe you're not as inspired by their success because they had different opportunities than you did. And for some people, I know that they're going to not agree with me on that, and that's fine. That's just how I personally feel. I only hang posters of American weightlifters in my gym. Again, some people are not going to agree with this, and I don't care. I think American weightlifting is a different sport than weightlifting of the past, and we are moving towards like a unified weightlifting community that agrees that like we're just not using drugs.
Right.
But in past years, we have not necessarily all been unified on this. So until we are, that's my very strong stance on it. And that's it. I mean,
yeah,
there's really not much more to say. I'm sure like if we open it up for discussion, there'd be people out there with really valid points, and I'm not going to say they're wrong, like, right? Like, I'm not in their shoes. I don't know what they're experiencing. I don't know their coach. But that's why I'm choosing to not take drugs, to take a year plus off and to get back in shape. So I am not a 75 kilo lifter.
Best looking 75 kilo. Look at this hair.
Right? Like, my hairs are dead, my nails are dead. But yeah, I'm fluffy. So to get back in shape and actually come back and be able to compete again in a session, and not just sneak into nationals, but really come back and do really well.
Right.
So those kinds of results don't take months. So again, exceptions to this, right? Like, we're seeing crossover from other sports. People with athletic backgrounds, they're getting into weightlifting. They are still able to make a session solely because of their athletic background, right? Not even because they're experienced weightlifters. They're just very talented. But the way that we're moving, like, you really do have to devote a quad or 2 or 3 to be at the level that you want to be at. And even then, it's maybe not going to be enough. You may still be sneaking into AO series. And that's just it. Like, there's really no magic pill that's going to get you where you want to go. And because, it's not about passing one drug test. Like, if you truly want to be the top 8 females or one of the top 8 males in the country, you have to consistently pass drug tests.
Yeah. And it's not just like 1 or 2. It's like
it's
every
a lot.
other week.
It's like they show up at your house at 7 a.m. and they're like, all right, like, piss in this cup. Like, you inevitably would get caught.
Yeah.
It's not cool enough to just pass 1. Like, you have to pass a lot.
All of them.
A lot. All of them, right? Not like, kind of passed. Like, yeah. No, like, all of them.
Every week.
Yeah, well, it's not even every week. It could be. Like, I mean, they can do whatever they want. Yeah, but you don't know when they're going to come.
Right.
So if you are trying to be top 3 and you're on the cusp and you're top 30 and you're like, I'm going to do this drug for this amount of time, 1, your coach is going to know. They're going to figure it out. We're not dumb. We see things, even though you don't think we see things. We're always listening. We're always watching.
Yeah, she knows.
I know. If any of my athletes were on drugs, again, like, performance enhancing, right? because I do have athletes who have, medications they take that are not allowed in competition, that are allowed out of competition. That's not a problem with me. Like, we've discussed it. We know that they have to get off at a certain time, or like not take Midol when they're going to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're not in the pool. They're not going to be in the pool. And that's no offense to them. That's just the reality of the situation. Like, they are really competitive local lifters, and that's about it. And that's what their goals are. You need to seriously consider the implications of taking those substances if you are top 30.
Yes.
You do. You need to seriously consider the implications even if you're not and you are competing. Now, even locally, state meets, local meets, like, you do not know if that meet director is going to have you SADA there or not. So be prepared. Talk to your coach. Your coach should be, by the way, guys, familiar with all of these rules and regulations, or have the tools to look up which substances. I'm not saying your coach, like myself, I don't have all these substances memorized or the dosages or what's allowed, but I have the app on my phone. I can pull up the, water, you saw it, I can pull up their website before a meet. We have a meet tomorrow. You need to have a dialogue with your coach if you do go on these websites and you find there are substances that you are on that are banned, so you can come up with a plan with your coach to get to a place where you can compete cleanly. Because, and I think the beauty of this is it is possible. And if you see all these amazing athletes, we're seeing girls, Caitlin Hogan, who needs to get on this podcast if she's listening. Caitlin, if you were out there, I think Mary is dying to interview you. Alyssa Ritchie, Kathleen Winters, I think, did double body weight, right? She attempted it.
Right.
But like, she's even
Lucero
attempting
did.
it. Lucero did. She was the heaviest woman in American history to successfully make a double body weight clean and jerk. Maddie is close. She did not, although they announced at nationals they did. She didn't. Close though. She's very, very close. Those women are clean.
100%.
They're 100% clean, guys. So, I'm not here to inspire you either and say, like, yeah, if you work really hard, you're going to be Maddie Rogers. You're always going to be you. You're never going to be them, and that's okay. But it's not to say that you can't have a degree of success, or, maybe, you're out there listening and you are more talented than these athletes and you were just starting out. There's no reason why you can't achieve the same success if they all come from great coaching backgrounds. Right? They all have teams in their corner who fully support them and know the rules and the regulations, and they've taken all the steps to get them there. Those are the people you want to align yourself with and model your teams after so that you can achieve the same success.
Absolutely.
Continue your education, go to seminars, further, if you're a coach out there, further your coaching education so that you can share with your athletes this knowledge to improve their performance. At no point has anyone at USAW or otherwise been like, everyone needs to take a pharmacology course so that your athletes can get stronger and better. Here is a sample. No. And fish oil, by the way, that's not fish oil is great, but again, there are even some fish oils out there that have substances in them that are banned. No. By the way, yes. So check your fish oil. I was going to use that as an example, and that's a terrible example. Yeah, check your fish oil. Some of them, yes, almost everyone takes fish oil. By the way, guys, little product placement. Core Omega is great. They're completely okay. I love them. It's not sponsored by Core Omega, but they're great. They recently sent me samples, and I love it. It's like a coconut flavor. Yeah, I know, and I don't even like fish oil. But that, there are products that USA promotes too, then those are great products to be on. So if you see USAW promoting them, they are clean. Do not take random supplements. Do not take creatine pills in the warm-up room at nationals that come from some random lifter. This is a reference, again, to someone who was popped, so if you didn't get it, that's on you. I'm sure there's people out there who got that. Don't use that excuse. Anyone is going to see through your flimsy excuses too, who knows these things, so don't try that either with anybody. We will all just laugh at you and then feel really bad for you, but not really. That was so mean, but I don't care.
You're going ham. Go ham.
I feel very passionately about it. And I've had some really great coaches, and I've had some not great coaches in life. And any good coach out there will tell you there are ways to succeed without performance-enhancing drugs. And that's pretty much it.
That's it.
There's a lot of things you can do to be good. But in this country, that is not one of them.
Drugs are bad.
Performance, and you know what? They're not even necessarily bad. We could get into like good and bad. They're not allowed. They're not permitted. They were not created, right? A lot of these drugs were not created for bad people or to do bad things. They are drugs that are being used inappropriately in sport,
right,
that where we see it's an ethical issue. And I want people to understand that too, because if you are on one of these substances and you are on it for a medical condition, I don't want them to feel like they're a bad person. Maybe their integrity, yeah, you're going to feel a little compromised because you know you're out of integrity.
Right.
But you're not a bad person, and you can get back in integrity by first admitting that you're on it. And that, yeah, you know what? No pharmaceutical company was awarded funding to develop that product for bad intentions.
No.
They were not. When they developed it for a certain reason, and it's the reason why you're taking it that is unethical. And you're not bad, but what you're doing is not right. And that's it. Yep. It's not, you can get back in integrity. You can switch teams. You can switch coaches. You can switch tactics. This is not a life statement. No, it's not a life sentence. You're not bad. You are just out of integrity. And that's it. So, and that's why too, like, I don't want to be the coach everyone's like, oh yeah, if you take drugs, you're an awful person and you're bad. No. If one of my athletes ever got to the point where they were taking something and I didn't know about it and I heard about it, or if you're dealing with an athlete who is taking something and you hear about it, you don't want to go and be like, you're a horrible person and this is bad and awful.
Yeah,
you really need to get to the root of the problem. And so if you are listening, like, please have someone else to help you with this. A lot of times too, when these people are taking it, it's not because they're idiots. They're probably going through something else in life or medically, where they have felt like they had no other choice but to do this.
Right.
So get back in integrity, find a support system, or be that support system, and change directions, I guess.
That's great.
Right?
That's amazing.
That's it. You're not bad.
You're not bad.
You're not bad. You're not doing a good thing either, but you're not bad.
It can change.
It can change. And that's all I got.
That's awesome. All right, Jilly, thank you for co-hosting. Where can people find you and find your barbell club?
I'm located in San Antonio, Texas. I have a barbell club and a strength and conditioning program located out of Texas Strength Systems. My business that I run with Brittany Rucker, who's my assistant coach, is TSS Barball and TSS Strength and Conditioning. My Instagram is at Jilly Jaworske, Jaworske. It's a mouthful. It's
Jaworske.
It's Polish. You can find me on Instagram. You can also send me an email. My email is on my Instagram, and our barbell club is at TSS Barball. And you can find information there as well.
Simple. Thank you for spitting some knowledge today.
Always. Thank you for having me.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you next week. Bye.
If you like what you heard today, please help us connect with other female badasses. We would love if you would leave us a review on iTunes. Tell your friends about us. Visit our website, which is empoweredbyiron.com. You can find each of us on Instagram. Mary is at MaryMo_92, and Kristen is at Kristen with an I, Lander. Future topics will include nutrition, programming and training, mental health, and just general female badassery.
Yeah, so let us know what you want to hear. If you have any input, that'd be awesome. And guys, this is Empowered by Iron. We want it to be a resource and an outlet for women who are finding their confidence, their independence, and their strength through iron. So thank you for listening. Thank you for checking in. And until next time, I'm Mary.
I'm Kristen.
And this is Empowered by Iron.